Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Hello and welcome to the Success in Africa podcast episode 45. My name is Dr. Modupe Pearce, and I am a scholar and practitioner of leadership and organizational development. Simply put, I study what makes people successful. I have been studying this now for 3 decades with a particular focus on people in Africa. And in this podcast, I'm going to share stories, lessons, and insights about people having success in Africa. Why this podcast? Because I am sick and tired of Africa being the poorest continent in the world. We are blessed with the world's greatest resource, that is young people. Africa will soon have the largest number of working age people in the world, and when those people achieve success, watch out. Africa's wealth will be unparalleled. Why? Because I don't know of too many Africans whose goal in life it is to die poor. You see, success in life is simply the achievement of a predetermined goal, whether that goal is owning a house and a car or creating employment for 100 people or transforming your village into a high-income community. This podcast has been created to help you to achieve it. So, if you are serious about achieving success in Africa, I want you to subscribe to this channel. If you like this video after you've watched it, please click the like button. This episode is brought to you courtesy of BCA Leadership, the largest leadership enhancement company in Africa. If you have questions that you want me to answer after watching this video, log on to BCA Online, the link is on the screen, and post your questions there. That is where I will respond to your questions. Today, I am starting a new series on relationships. I have to confess, I don't ever recall being as excited and nervous as I have been in preparing this series. Even though I am convinced that this series is important to success in Africa, I'm also nervous because, frankly, the topics that we're going to learn about over the next 4 weeks are topics that some people may have some difficulty with. And I expect some questions, even at the very fundamental level of how is this important to having success in Africa? Or what does this have to do with opening a business or a new enterprise? So let me just spend a few minutes on the why before I introduce you to the persons who I'm going to profile to see the learning points from this episode. You see, folks, in Africa, cash may be king, but relationships are gold. In a continent where the legal structures and the guardrails are porous and, frankly, identification tools are often faulty, personal trust is even more valuable in Africa than in other more developed economies. But these relationships that are important are not just professional relationships. They're also personal relationships. Relationships with one's spouse. Relationships with your children. These relationships impact a leader's success in Africa more than one might imagine. Let me illustrate it with the journey of 2 people that is intensely personal to me. These 2 people happen to be my mother and my father, Mrs. Olive Taylor Pearce and the Reverend Canon Dr. Modupe Taylor Pearce. For the purposes of this podcast, I will refer to them as Olive and Modupe. Olive and Modupe both grew up in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Both of them went through school in Sierra Leone, but Modupe did not meet Olive until Olive was about 21 years old, mainly because Modupe is 7 years older than Olive. And he had been working in the provinces of Sierra Leone and studying in Europe prior to meeting Olive. They were married in 1963 when Olive was 23 years old and Modupe was 30. And they're both still alive today. Now, for the past 61 years, through thick and through thin, they have stayed faithful to each other. They have raised biological and non-biological children. They've lived in multiple countries together, and they've impacted thousands of lives together. In his working career, Modupe has been hailed as the chief executive who saved the West African Examinations Council from an existential crisis which would have destroyed the organization back in 1982 and 1983. And he laid the foundation for the transformation of the Nairobi Evangelical Graduate School of Theology to become Africa International University, which today is Africa's premier producer of theological scholars. Both of them became entrepreneurs after the age of 50. In Modupe's case, he started an organization called the Diaconia Interdenominational Services for Counseling Evangelism and Teaching, otherwise known as DISCET. Today, DISCET continues to impact thousands of lives positively through the provision of psychosocial, marital, and spiritual counseling and counseling training to hundreds and thousands of people. For her part, Olive started Olimod School Outfitters in response to the need for a reliable supply of school uniforms for Sierra Leone's school children and administrators. Within 15 years of its establishment, Olimod had grown into the largest distributor of school uniforms in Sierra Leone. Now, neither Olive nor Modupe had received any business training or entrepreneurship training. Olive had been a mathematics school teacher for decades before she started Olimod School Outfitters. She didn't know much about hats or berets or socks or cloth material other than how to inspect them as a school teacher to make sure that they were worn properly. Modupe was a career educator and administrator, but would hardly have qualified as an entrepreneur or even a trained counselor when he started DISCET. So what was the secret to their success? These two career educators enjoyed a trust-filled relationship with each other, and they cheerled each other on their entrepreneurship journey. Even after 30 years of marriage, when they were about to start their entrepreneurial journeys, they chose to love and support each other's dreams and risk their personal and financial capital to support those dreams. Modupe trusted Olive when Olive sank thousands of dollars into setting up Olimod School Outfitters and ordering her first few batches of school uniforms, which required significant working capital. He trusted that she would never jeopardize their money on something that she did not fully believe would work, and she would not misuse the money on something totally selfish. Olive also trusted Modupe when he wanted to start DISCET and invested significant amount of his time and energy and their personal finances into organizing everything for DISCET, from fundraising activities and even having an office occupy an entire floor of their house for the DISCET offices. This trust that they had in each other was built over years of faithfulness to their marital vows. In a society that is often chauvinistic, where marital infidelity, especially for married men, is treated rather casually, Modupe has been privately and publicly hailed by male and female friends, relatives, colleagues, clergy, and admirers as having always been faithful in his marital vows. Olive has also been hailed as having been faithful in keeping her marital vows. This mutual faithfulness is something that I, as a young boy, took for granted. until I became a man and I learned that in their marital life there were periods of temptation, periods of tension, and periods of disagreement. But through any of those winter seasons, they chose to love each other. They chose to love each other. Modupe's love was not just an emotion that stemmed from the beauty of, seeing a young bride in a wedding dress, because frankly, that beauty can fade after years of childbearing, child raising, and the ravages of time. Olive's love was not just a feeling that came, from, Modupe's ability to be tall, dark, and handsome all at the same time, or from the money that he brought home every month to provide for the home. After all, those characteristics also had seasons when they frankly disappeared. For example, the long months in the late 70s when Modupe was jobless and had been blacklisted by the government for purportedly making negative statements about the president of Sierra Leone. Indeed, their love was a choice that they made to commit acts of caring and love for each other and towards each other, prioritizing the needs of their partner ahead of their own needs. And those acts of caring assured each of them that they were loved no matter what, that their love was a choice that they made to forsake all other admirers, despite when there were times when there was opportunity and sometimes even desire to do the opposite. You see, by choosing to love, they earned and they cemented trust from each other and also from people who worked with them and interacted with them. It's a big part of the reason why whenever Olimod School Outfitters needed a loan, it wasn't just banks that were lining up to give them a loan. Even friends and colleagues were eager to loan them money at lower interest rates because they knew that Modupe and Olive were people whose word was their bond. And if they said they would pay back, they would do exactly that. Today, both Olive and Modupe are happily retired, but their professional legacy and their entrepreneurial journey lives on in Olimod School Outfitters and in DISCET, both of which still exist and are currently managed by a new generation of leaders. The lessons they have laid down still remain. By investing in their relationship with each other, this successful couple built a culture of trust that influenced stakeholders of their organizations to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into their ventures. The lesson to learn from today's story is the importance of choosing to love. You see, folks, love is a choice, not just an emotion. It is heartbreaking to hear of entrepreneurs who invest so much into their professional careers and then lose their spouse because of neglect. This is a poor choice. To be successful in Africa, you will need your village to be on your side. And that village starts with your spouse. So choose to love every day. It is your most important investment. We have now come to the end of today's episode. I do hope you have learned something about the importance of relationships in becoming successful in Africa. Next week, we're going to continue with this series by exploring another aspect of relationships that is important for being successful in Africa. I want to thank you for listening or watching. Please do not forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Tell your friends about it. Together, we can transform our beloved continent of Africa. I'll see you next week.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.